I ran into you for the first time in LA at TCG.
Yes.
And Tarell was walking down the street, and I'd seen photographs of him. And he's a fine-looking man in photographs, but a beautiful man in person. And so I ran up to him in the street, and I just went, "Hi, I'm Kwame Kwei-Armah, but oh my God, you're so beautiful."
He did.
And
we had a course at Yale called the Black Atlantic, Theater of the Black Atlantic. And it was an incredible dramaturgy course where we were learning plays from both sides of the Atlantic theater that were written by artists of color. And it sort of made me think, we got to a point in the 80s where that sort of stopped. We sort of saw the last of the plays sort of back and forth. And then there was this play, this gem called Elmina's, that was your play that I thought, oh, the dialogue continues.
Oh, bless.
So it was really great and wonderful. It made me feel like there was a conversation to be had.
For a myriad of different reasons, some immature, some cultural, I had rejected Shakespeare. And so actually, The Much Ado was my first time actually doing a Shakespeare, particularly as a director. And I had rejected Shakespeare, not because I didn't recognize the beauty of the poetry, not because I didn't recognize the scale of what he was speaking about often and how that could be universal. But being a former colonial or a child of a former colonial, Shakespeare was kind of rammed down our throats as being the only kind of writing, as being the god of Britain, the colonial power, and therefore must be my god too. But actually, I found there was so much safety in being able to dive into something that could be cut in the way that it could be cut, that can be interpreted. The robustness of the writing, the robustness of the experience actually made me feel really safe and allowed me to be as imaginative as I wanted to be in a way that I might not be with a slightly more delicate piece of writing.
Right. The RSC approached me about coming to being a resident. I was like, sure, absolutely, because it's, again, another time for me to be able to get into the process in a way that I could get dirty. I could get in and feel really like I could, I didn't have to, there was no sort of deadline on it. It was always just about the exploration, about the investigation. You look at this period between Julius Caesar and Hamlet and Antony and Cleopatra where he's not doing much. And all of the publication sort of goes away of him being in plays or in anybody's on stage anymore. He's sort of sitting back a lot. So, and you think 5 years of not being on the stage can make you switch just a little bit what you put on the stage, what you put into the mouth.
Like give someone a 10-page monologue.
Like give somebody
when you don't have to do it.
Right? I don't have to say that. Burbage will do it. So you know what I mean? Like we'll just give it to him and let him say it.
You spoke about whether there was a difference in the plays that he wrote when he was an actor.
Oh, yeah.
Or whether there was a difference in the plays when he was no longer an actor, and what responsibilities he placed on the actor, possibly when he would no longer had to do it himself.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the thing that I get, for me, again, I'm sure some scholar will come along and be like, Tarell, you have no idea what you're talking about. But
with that accent as well.
Yes,
right?
yes. Very much. But I think at the end of the day, when doing research and looking at things, I kept saying to myself and asking other people, what is he doing in his life when he's writing this play? What is he up to? Did he just have a really bad divorce? Was there a flood? And you know this as well. When you're writing certain pieces, the little notches in the tree of you get put into the play somehow. You see the scar or the blossom impressed on the page.
Talk to me a little bit, sir, about the process, if you would, about approaching Shakespeare as a writer, even before approaching it as a director.
Well, I mean, I have always had a great admiration for Shakespeare. And like you, I have a very similar background in coming to the theater as an actor. Sometimes you fall into the section where there's the slide and you're like, oh, I can get on these words and slide down. It feels so nice and play. And then you run into these other little minds where you recognize that your Southern tongue or whatever cultural background that you come from can kind of play antithetical to what is the approved way of doing Shakespeare. So you spend time eddying in that part of the realm. Shakespeare's structure and the way in which he, she, them, they created these plays dealt with things that I thought were important to plays, which means connecting, having a spirituality throughout the play, or something that's connected to other, outside of us. And then each play also deals with something intimate in terms of interpersonal, but it also deals with a sort of conflict of the state. And I just thought I thought that's why these plays have lasted this long. We're always figuring out, you know, what's bigger, what's larger, what's more. We're always trying to deal with what's in between, and we're always in conversation with the state. It's about recharging. And even, I heard you say this too, that, you know, there's times where you need solitude in order to recharge. My brain is so actively trying to figure out what everybody wants, needs at all times that I get overwhelmed. At that point, I now know that I'm the person in the room that has to be alive and aware to everything, everyone, and make sure that we are all headed towards the same goal. And that process can be exhausting.
There are just times when you've got to do you.
Sure.
And as an artist, our life is all about giving. Our life is all about reflecting. We write and we produce and we direct, not simply because, you know, it's not even about the money. It's about, right? It can't be about the money. We do it because we think that this is why we were placed here, to help or to contribute. My mother wanted me to be a lawyer. Right? And then, and it wasn't really until many years later of her perceiving that I've been successful, that she would turn to me and go, oh, I get it. I understand. This is your way of serving.
Sure. In
the way that I wanted you to be a lawyer to serve.
I think what people think of as creativity being infinite, they think it applies to the body. But the body, the brain, and the spirit are all of a human form, and that gets tired. And when that gets tired, there is no more creativity to be had. And the generosity of spirit that I think is so important, especially in theater. I mean, there are other forms that one doesn't have to be as generous at the moment. For example, there's a way of taking away, making the art and bringing it and being generous in this way. But this form asks and taxes that generosity instantaneously. You walk in the door, there's someone who needs to engage with you, and you need to, in that moment, express your most intimate feeling. Why do you need a pool of water? Well, it's reflective of the, Yemaya, which is very intimate to me because it is the mother of all things, and then there's the middle passage. You have to be able to talk about that right now at 10 o'clock in the morning in this production meeting and access that feeling so that someone understands it and can then design or create from that. And that's exhausting.
But then there's also that thing in you that you kind of go, do you know what? I'm not coal mining.
Right.
I'm not digging streets. Exactly. So, you know, woe is me. And then, so therefore, I do it. I spent a lot of time in the last year working with beautiful writers like yourself who are poet writers and who can use both sides of the brain. I know that's been, you know, that's no longer the way that we see the brain, but sure. I need to stay there for a while. And I've loved working with the poet writers because my brain doesn't work in that way. I write politically, not that the poet just doesn't, but I write in a very, I often describe it as the difference between Muhammad Ali, the way you poetic was, right, and Joe Fraser, who kind of, you know, can go in and slug away. And I'm very happy to be Joe Fraser. When I became an AD, I was surprised that a single new play ever gets produced. Yeah. I was like, the miracle that I somehow was chosen, that somehow all of the gods aligned to allow me to be produced in this season with all of the influences and budgets and themes and I mean, it's a miracle.
We'll make it so that, you know, it's possible to, you know, tour these schools and go into the classrooms and see a Hamlet of color and him be right in front of you and have that access. So I always find the weird model, and that's why I was so fascinated by the mobile unit when you all did Much Ado. I just thought that was incredibly, that's the weird model. That's the outlier in the system that is, you know, going to change and revolutionize things.
My favorite moment of that tour was hearing the story of Don John walking in at Rikers prison, and someone, after having set up the lovers to fail, and a prisoner got up and went, "I see you. You ain't shit."
Yeah.
That was my favorite artistic moment of last year.
Yeah.
To just know that it had got under the skin and that it had got inside of the soul and the spirit. We both have a connection, though yours far more intimate, to August Wilson.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what August means to you.
Don't make me cry. I felt like he placed me in a story, in a well-crafted fable of being a writer at that time. I was running around doing the thing, you know, I was at Yale, so I was like backpacking everywhere. I was freezing to death. I was, you know, working 12 hours, working at the cabaret, doing my job, trying to make, you know, trying to keep my apartment, trying to make ends meet, trying to write plays, trying to produce plays. And then one day, in the storm of it, he sent me off to buy an iPod for his daughter. And I was like, what? I don't have a car. I'm so tired. Oh my God. So, and like he gave me this envelope. You know, the thing about it in retrospect is, again, he was putting me in such a tapestry of what it means to be generous and an artist, but an artist of color. And so he gave me this envelope full of 20s. Like $400 worth of 20s. And if you know black people, that's so black. To give you an envelope full of 20s, like who does, like $400 worth of 20s? Not just like he didn't give me a check, he didn't give me a card, he gave me this thick ass envelope and was like, go buy my daughter an iPod. And I'm walking around New Haven with this big ass envelope going, all right, well, I mean, and it wasn't a leather envelope, it was this paper envelope, crumply envelope he pulled out of a pocket, smelled like smoke, you know, and then like, and sent me on my journey. And I thought that was like, oh, at the time, again, I was like, that's crazy. But again, reflecting on it, I go, he's putting me in this place where I am a part of this incredible, he's putting me into the history, purposefully. And I went and bought the iPod, and I came back and I gave it to him, and I went to class, and I sort of sat in class like, God, please deliver me. And as you delivered Daniel and so many others. And he called me back on my cell phone, which was this little chicklet of a phone at the time, and he just like called me. He was like, you know, I need to talk to you. And I was like, if it's about that iPod, I'm gonna So I'm sitting there, and he said, you know, I saw your play the other day, which I did not know. He had gone to see my play at the cabaret. And he said, you know, you know, you're a young writer. You're good. You got a strong voice, but, you know, you repeat yourself a few times. And I was like, August, you repeat yourself all the time. But I kept that in the back of my head. Again, I was like, in hindsight, I was like, Tarell, just be quiet. And he said, and you use music, and I need you to always use music. So here's your iPod. Once I started crying, which I did, I was like, I mean, this was back when the iPods were brand new. So I was like, oh my God. And he was just, And then his daughter was inside, and he looks at her, and they're laughing. They're like, just laughing at me. And I thought, this is his way of welcoming me to the family. And here is how one can be generous. Yeah. Do it. That's how it's done. And that to me was the most important lesson.
I walked out of this theater, and for the first time I saw a man of color who did not trade access for truth, who said, I will be me and I will go and it will travel and it will speak. And I saw manhood. I was almost as if I was walked into manhood with August in one hand and Muhammad Ali at the other and Public Enemy behind me saying, fight the power.
Yeah, sure, sure.
And I remember just walking out going, it can be done. It can. You can speak our truth and yet be universal. You don't have to neuter yourself.
Yeah, sure.
I think that's really important, actually, because, you know, I love the way that you have this transatlantic career.
Do you?
Where yeah, so does your air miles account.
Yeah. But, not the bags under my eyes.
Yeah. But it is, I mean, it's relatively new, at least certainly for me, to see an artist of the African diaspora be able to exist and coexist between the Public, Steppenwolf, the Royal Shakespeare Company, the Young Vic, the Royal Court, and to be able to bounce between these several institutions and have your work speak equally and profoundly to both must be really interesting. How do you negotiate that with yourself?
Theater artists get to do something that other sort of art forms don't, in that we have to learn to speak to our audiences immediately. We don't get a sort of buffer time. We sort of immediately you are introduced to people and they will begin to understand, nod, not laugh, kind of laugh to things immediately, and you have to then pick up on those hints.
If there's a difference between an American actor and a British actor, and how you negotiate that on the floor. So I won't necessarily go into that right now. I'll say that it's been a tremendous learning curve because I landed in Baltimore thinking, well, I kind of know theatre a bit, and we all speak English, and and we all kind of like the same plays, and I kind of grew up with lots of American plays, so I think I kind of know, and landed and realized that I know nothing. And the steep learning curve is that we do speak the same language, but sometimes it flows in different ways. And sometimes, my biggest thing that I had to learn was it's not what I say that counts, it's what is heard. And so I have found it to be a brilliant learning curve. There are differences in the culture, but there are differences between London and Glasgow. There are differences between New York and Miami. So cultural specificity is absolutely right at the heart of negotiating the two. I have found in terms of actors and directors and artists that our hearts, our minds, our souls, and our quests for greatness to be exactly the same. It is a place that has come to terms with its diversity and its multiculturalism. Actually, in a way that sometimes I'm very interested in seeing that America may not have, certainly in terms of its diversity, certainly in terms of its integration and of communities outside of the workplace. Do I think that there is the will? Absolutely. Do I think that the way is clear? Absolutely. Do I think that it will happen? Absolutely. Is it here now? No, it isn't. Will I ever return? Of course I will. I don't know in what capacity. Do I see myself as an artist with a foot in America and a foot in Britain, and that my service is dedicated to both as well as the diaspora in Africa? Yes, I do.